Ego or ID, those Persnickety evolutionists. It seems to me that mainstream evolutionary scientists have misunderstood young Earth creationism even worse than the young Earth creationist is said to misunderstand evolution. Then, the intelligent design movement came along, and that only complicated matters. The fault for this complication is not within ID itself, but, it seems, from a practice indulged in by certain evolutionists, a practice not unlike that of a particular kind of bird. For the upteenth million time, then, here is what ID is and is not saying. At least, here are my own thoughts on the matter. In what follows, I'll restrict my attention to the biological realm only. Biology as opposed to, say, the fine-tuning of the physical constants. We may divide ID into two different but overlapping categories. The first is what may be called general ID, and the second special ID. By general ID, I mean the claim that marks of intelligence are seen within the design found in nature. From my perspective, this claim is obviously true, the claim that there is intelligent design in nature. Even the people who deny that claim admit that there is a strong temptation to see intelligent design everywhere in nature. A brief illustration of the appearance of intelligence might be human DNA. I have been told that a single strand of human DNA, if unraveled, would stretch from Earth to the Moon and back 7 times. 7 times to the Moon and back. And yet there are many strands of DNA in each and every cell of our body, and this DNA contains instructions or information. Where can information possibly come from? Outside of biology, it is only and always said to come from a mind. Why arbitrarily suppose biology offers us an exception on this score? At the very least, we can agree that it is more likely than not that the design in nature betrays actual intelligence. And further, it is only as a result of a priori presumption that such claims as general ID makes are seriously denied. By special ID, I mean the more specific claim that there are irreducibly complex systems in nature. But what is IC, or irreducible complexity? It is absolutely vital this question be answered, for IC is one of the most misunderstood and misrepresented concepts in all of history. I have never heard IC accurately presented by anyone who did not first believe in it. Let's get our facts straight. If you are going to deny something and present lectures on it to your professional colleagues or write books denouncing it, you should know what it is that you disagree with. A system is IC if and only if it consists of multiple parts which work together to perform a particular function, which could not be performed if any of the parts of the system were absent from the system. I'll read that again. A system is IC if and only if it consists of multiple parts which work together to perform a particular function, which could not be performed if any of the parts of the system were absent from the system. A common illustration of an IC system is the man-made system we know and love as the mousetrap. A mousetrap has certain parts, all of which must be present to effectively catch mice. Remove any one of these parts and the mousetrap, qua mousetrap, ceases to exist. It is not uncommon for people to come up with all sorts of scenarios for mousetrap precursors, for more simple mousetraps. The problem is these so-called better mousetraps, these more simple systems, have all the same parts as a normal mousetrap. In some scenarios, the base of the trap is removed, but the trap is then placed on the floor, and the floor, for all intents and purposes, is the base, the new base of the trap. So there's a wooden base, and the trap is set. When the mouse eats the cheese, it goes forward to catch the mouse. Obviously, you already knew what a mousetrap was, but there you go. And there is a talk given by Dr. Ken Miller. I think I've got the name right. In this talk, he speaks out against IC. He says that there are certain parts of a natural outboard motor which could also be used for a natural hypodermic needle. Who cares? The definition of IC clearly states that the system, in a more simplified state, could have a different function. That is not in question. Rather, to qualify as irreducible, it is the exact same function which cannot be executed in a more optimal and simplified system. Let me repeat the definition. A system is IC if and only if it consists of multiple parts which work together to perform a particular function, which function could not be performed if any of the parts of the system were absent from the system. Whether the current system is using recycled parts is besides the point. So that is how we are to understand IC. When we look at nature, do we see IC? So far as I can tell, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm not too dogmatic about this, but it seems to me that probably there are systems in nature, probably, which are irreducibly complex. The bacterial flagellum Dr. Miller was talking about seems to be just such a case. Dr. Miller, said that it wasn't an example of irreducible complexity because he misunderstood, like everybody who denies ID misunderstands what irreducible complexity is. Let's suppose the bacterial flagellum is IC. What are we to infer from this supposed fact? To answer this question, we need to back up and look at what IC is a response to, namely neo-Darwinism. Neo-Darwinism is the view that the many different sorts of animals and plants all share a common ancestor. Furthermore, this common ancestor gradually evolved into the myriad life forms we see today, primarily through genetic mutation and natural selection. So neo-Darwinism, as I use the term here, precludes the possibility of punctuated equilibrium. It was very, very gradual evolution and used almost exclusively natural selection. That's what neo-Darwinism is. So we'll continue our examine of ID in video 2 of this series. Thank you.